The Battle of Assandun, 1016 AD, Knut the Great conquers England. The treachery of Edric Streona, how England lost to the Danes. What happens when a king is nicknamed the Unready, a warrior is called Ironside, and a treacherous noble earns the title of Streona the Slippery? How does a small hill in Essex become the stage for one of the most pivotal betrayals in English history? And why does a Danish prince, armed with a fleet and ambition, become one of England's greatest kings, while the land's own defenders crumble under the weight of treachery and missteps? Welcome to the dramatic tale of the Battle of Assandun, where swords clashed, loyalties wavered, and history hung in the balance. This is a story of Æthelred the Unready, a king infamous for his blunders, of Sweyn Forkbeard, the Viking who seized England but couldn't hold it, of Edmund Ironside, the last bastion of English resistance, and of Knut the Great, the man who turned conquest into empire. But at the heart of this epic lies a question. What happens when your greatest ally becomes your deadliest enemy? Let's unravel the twists and betrayals that led to the fall of an English dynasty and the rise of one of the most cunning kings of the medieval world. Stick around. You won't believe how it ends. The year is 1016 AD, and the fields of England are stained with blood, betrayal, and ambition. But to truly understand the clash at Assandun, we must rewind the clock to the reign of Æthelred the Unready, a king whose legacy is as infamous as his name suggests. Let us embark on a journey of intrigue, political folly, and Viking ferocity, a tale where every decision sealed a kingdom's fate. Æthelred II, known as the Unready, a misinterpretation of the Old English unread, meaning ill-advised, ascended to the throne in 978 AD, following the murder of his half-brother, Edward the Martyr. From the start, his reign was a mess, plagued by internal divisions and the ever-looming threat of Viking raids. For over 2 decades, Æthelred proved incapable of stemming the tide of Norse invaders, who pillaged the countryside with ruthless efficiency. The Viking threat had evolved. These were no longer opportunistic raiders looking for gold and silver. They were organized armies led by ambitious kings with their eyes set on conquest. By the turn of the millennium, England's shores were besieged by waves of attacks, particularly from Denmark. Among the most fearsome was Sweyn Forkbeard, a man with a name as sharp as his ambitions. In 1013, Sweyn Forkbeard landed on the shores of Kent with a vast army. England was ripe for the taking, with its disillusioned nobles and a king many considered incompetent. The northern lords, weary of Æthelred's failures, welcomed Sweyn as their king. A procession of oaths and pledges followed as these nobles, including key players from Northumbria, declared their allegiance to the Dane. However, not all of England rolled out the red carpet. In the south, Sweyn met resistance, forcing him to take his conquest one bloody skirmish at a time. By the end of the year, he reached London, where Æthelred, already infamous for his cowardice, fled to Normandy with his family. Sweyn was declared King of England, a title he wore triumphantly, if briefly. But fate had other plans. Just 5 weeks into his reign, Sweyn died suddenly, possibly from an illness or a stroke, leaving his son Knut to pick up the pieces of an unfinished conquest. The English nobles, realizing the vacuum of power left by Sweyn's death, bargained with Æthelred for his return. Terms were set. Æthelred had to promise reforms, pledging to rule more justly than before. Whether out of desperation or genuine hope, the king accepted, and he reclaimed the throne in 1014. Yet, Æthelred's promises were as brittle as his resolve. Knut, now a young and determined leader, returned to Denmark to regroup. Meanwhile, Æthelred's court devolved into chaos. Chief among the troublemakers was Edric Streona, the king's advisor, a man whose name would go down in history as synonymous with treachery. In the summer of 1015, an assembly was called at Oxford to unite the northern and southern factions of England. Among the attendees were Sigfrith and Morcar, powerful northern lords who had previously sided with Sweyn. This meeting, meant to mend divisions, turned into a bloodbath. On Edric Streona's orders, Sigfrith and Morcar were murdered under the guise of hospitality. The killings not only alienated the northern lords, but also enraged Æthelred's son, Edmund Ironside, who had been close to the victims. Edmund, so named for his unyielding bravery in battle, took matters into his own hands. He married Sigfrith's widow and claimed the northern territories, openly defying his father. In the summer of 1015, Knut returned with a vengeance. Supported by his brother Harald II of Denmark, he assembled a fleet of 200 ships and 10,000 warriors. Landing in Essex, Knut's campaign began with ruthless efficiency. Villages burned, crops were seized, and the English countryside trembled beneath the Viking boots. Edric Streona, ever the opportunist, switched sides, bringing with him a large contingent of English forces to bolster Knut's ranks. By the winter of 1015, much of Wessex had fallen under Knut's control. While Aethelred lay bedridden in London, Edmund Ironside emerged as the kingdom's last hope. Rallying troops where he could, Edmund engaged Knut's forces in a series of skirmishes. At Penselwood and Cheston, the young prince proved his mettle, but the battles were inconclusive. Meanwhile, Æthelred's mistrust of his own commanders led to further disarray. On April 23, 1016, Æthelred the Unready died in London, marking the end of an inglorious reign. Edmund was crowned by his supporters in London, a city that had resisted siege after siege and stood as a bastion of English resilience. As soon as he donned the crown, Edmund moved to block the Danish army's retreat path to their ships, positioning his forces on higher ground. Why? Because the ships were Knut's lifeline. If the Danes could escape and regroup, the war would drag on indefinitely. Edmund wasn't about to let that happen. His confidence was justified. Edmund's army was larger, fresher, and reinforced by loyal troops eager to defend their homeland. The Danes, by contrast, were exhausted, their numbers dwindling after a year of ceaseless battles. Moreover, Knut's ranks had swelled with English fighters of dubious loyalty, leaving him reliant on mercenaries who might not have the stomach for a losing battle. But Knut was no ordinary commander. Outnumbered or not, he would fight, not for survival, but for victory or death. The two armies faced each other near the village of Assandun. The English, perched atop a gentle hill, formed a battle line 4 men deep, their shields locked together in an impenetrable wall of wood and iron. Below, the Danes approached steadily across level ground, their faces grim but determined. The air buzzed with tension, and the English troops felt the fire of their king's words. "This is our land. Fight not for me, but for your homes, your families, your freedom." At the halfway point up the hill, Edmund gave the signal. The English charged, a thunderous wave of men and steel crashing down upon the Danes. The clash was deafening. Shields splintered, swords bit into flesh, and the air reeked of sweat, blood, and raw determination. For hours, the battle raged. The Danes fought with a desperate fury, as if each man had resolved to die before retreating. But gradually, their line began to waver. Edmund's forces pressed harder, sensing victory. It seemed as though the day was theirs. And then, the unthinkable happened. Edric Streona, Edmund's enigmatic advisor and one of the most duplicitous figures in English history, chose this moment to reveal his true colors. Without warning, he and his men withdrew from the field. It was as if a limb had been severed from the English army. In an instant, Edmund lost not just a chunk of his forces but also the momentum of the battle. Why did Edric betray his king? Perhaps he feared that Edmund, victorious, would not forget their turbulent history. Or perhaps Edric had never truly abandoned his secret alliance with Knut. Whatever his reasons, his treachery was a masterstroke of self-serving cunning, leaving the English army stunned and demoralized. But Edmund Ironside was not a man to wilt in the face of betrayal. Rallying his remaining troops, he roared, "We are better off without cowards. Stand with me now, and we shall still drive them back." With his personal retinue, Edmund charged directly into the Danish lines, carving a bloody path through the enemy ranks. His men fought like lions, cutting down Danes on all sides. For a moment, it seemed his sheer ferocity might turn the tide. But Knut, ever the opportunist, saw his chance. With Edric's betrayal tipping the scales, the Danes now had the numerical advantage. Knut urged his troops forward, pressing the attack with relentless determination. The English line faltered, their ranks thinning under the relentless Danish assault. As night fell, the battlefield was a charnel house. Exhausted and bloodied, the English were forced to retreat. Edmund and his surviving men pulled back, leaving Knut as the master of the field. It was a gloomy dawn at Assandun. Smoke lingered over the battlefield, a grim testament to the lives lost and the blood spilled. Many of England's greatest warriors lay cold on the damp earth, their dreams extinguished in the chaos. Yet among the carnage, Edmund Ironside, the tenacious English king, emerged alive, though bearing grievous wounds. His survival was both a testament to his resilience and a cruel twist of fate. For a man who had risked everything for England, the cost of survival would prove steep. Wounded but unbroken, Edmund refused to surrender. The man they called Ironside lived up to his name, rallying the remnants of his battered army. His retreat was not an act of cowardice, but a calculated gamble. He marched westward, hoping to find sanctuary and fresh troops among the fiercely independent men of the Welsh borders. Every step was a desperate bid for time and allies, his resolve as unyielding as the iron in his name. His destination? The rugged hills and dense forests near Gloucester, close to the wild expanse of the Forest of Dean. Edmund knew that in these untamed lands he might find the loyalty he so desperately needed. But his foe, the relentless Cnut, was not far behind. Like a hound scenting blood, Cnut pursued him with the precision of a predator. Past the rolling hills and shadowy woods of Gloucestershire, the chase reached its climax, not on a battlefield, but at a negotiation table. The air crackled with tension as Edmund and Cnut, two warriors who had shed blood for England's throne, came face to face. The setting was humble, yet heavy with symbolism. A wooden hall just outside Gloucester, its walls stained with smoke, and its roof bearing the marks of the weather. This was a battlefield of words, not swords, and once again, the ever-slippery Edric Streona was at the center. A man of shifting loyalties and untrustworthy smirks, Edric brokered a deal that would divide England. Under the terms of the agreement, Edmund retained the southern heartlands, Essex, the cradle of English kingship. Meanwhile, Cnut claimed the lion's share, the fertile lands of Mercia, the warrior-rich Northumbria, and the mercantile jewel of London. It was a pragmatic division, one that reflected the realities of their respective power bases. But the agreement contained one ominous clause. If either leader died, the other would inherit the entire realm. It was a pact sealed with mutual distrust, a ticking time bomb that would determine England's future. Just over a month later, the unthinkable happened. Edmund Ironside was dead. The cause of his death remained shrouded in mystery. Some whispered that his battlefield wounds had claimed him, others spoke of poison slipped into his cup by a treacherous hand. And then there was the most bizarre theory of all, that an assassin had skewered the unfortunate king with a spike while he sat on the toilet. Was this grim fate the work of Edric Streona, the man whose betrayal at Assandun had already changed the course of the war? Many believed so. Ironically, Edric's reputation as a traitor was so well established that he became the default suspect for any foul deed, whether or not he was guilty. Whatever the truth, Edmund's untimely demise cleared the path for Cnut to claim the entire English throne. Edric Streona may have thought himself invincible, but Cnut had no tolerance for treachery, even from those who served him. By Christmas of the same year, Edric was dead, executed on Cnut's orders. The manner of his death is said to have been both swift and brutal, a fitting end for a man whose betrayal had defined his life. With Edric out of the way and Edmund gone, Cnut stood unchallenged. England now had a Danish king. But unlike the Norman conqueror who would arrive 50 years later, Cnut ruled not as a foreign invader, but as a pragmatic unifier. He preserved English laws, promoted Englishmen to positions of power, and lavished gifts upon the church. His reign was one of collaboration, not conquest. There were no mass uprisings, no scorched earth policies, no forced cultural assimilation. Cnut's strategy was simple yet effective. Work with the system, not against it. Under his rule, England became a cornerstone of a vast North Sea empire that included Denmark, Norway, and parts of Sweden. Cnut's fleet dominated the seas, his alliances through marriage strengthened his grip on power, and his shrewd governance transformed Denmark from a fragile kingdom into a regional superpower. Cnut's reign marked a rare moment of stability in a turbulent age. While his conquest may lack the legendary status of William the Conqueror's, its significance cannot be overstated. Cnut showed that a foreign king could win the loyalty of the English through respect, pragmatism, and vision. As for Edmund Ironside, his legacy endures as a symbol of resistance, a man who fought to the bitter end only to be undone by treachery. And Edric Streona? He remains history's ultimate cautionary tale, proof that treachery may win you the moment, but never the war. If you enjoyed this captivating tale of honor, betrayal, and strategy, don't forget to follow us, subscribe, and click the notification bell to stay updated with more gripping stories from history. Your journey through the past has only just begun.